Okay, now I'm ready to begin working on the book itself. So I'm going to switch over to the book subtool. And the first thing I want to do is actually hide all of the different objects that are within the subtool menu. So I'll hold down Shift and tap on that particular layer, and that kind of hides everything else. I could just get a good look at how the book cover looks before I start sculpting it. Now, I designed the edge loops to actually work well with me adding some definition to this piece. Whenever you're working with a square object, it's sometimes helpful to actually do your first smooth with the smooth turned off. So I'm going to actually disable the SMT, or smooth, and hit divide. And what that does is it divides everything but keeps it in the square format. And now when I go ahead and turn on smooth and I divide, you'll notice everything stayed in a much truer square form. Even though it is rounding off, it just has a nice, more chiseled edge to it rather than being too soft. So I'm going to increase this to a level 4. First thing I want to do, again, like most of my models, I want to begin massing the object. Now, there's something interesting here that we need to look at with our brush settings. So I'm going to switch over again to the clay tubes, again my favorite brush to start with. If I start carving into the cover with the brush just as its default setting, and I turn around to the inside of the book cover, sometimes if the geometry is a little bit too narrow, you'll actually get penetration on the opposite side. This tends to happen a lot when you're sculpting a character's ears. Sculpting into the ear on one side tends to form on the opposite side, and that might not be the desired look. And same thing here. So let me try sculpting a little bit further down and see if that results. Yeah. Okay. So you can see what's happening here. We want to be careful not to make that happen. We don't want to have that effect. So I'm going to Control Z back. And what you want to do is check off back face masking. But I'm going to go to brush, right, with my brush selected. And I'm going to come down here to the auto masking. And I'm going to turn on back face mask. That will prevent my brush now from penetrating through the backside of the model. I do have a bit of symmetry, and because I am masking this out, I can use that. So it's not going to be X symmetry, right? Because X symmetry is going to be both sides, and so if I'm detailing this panel here, it's going to actually end up doing that on the spline, and I don't want that effect. But what I can do is go into my transforms, activate symmetry, and turn on my Y and Z, and let's just see what that does. So that's going to not only allow me to do top to bottom, which works symmetrically, but also from the front to back. Again, always ensure that local symmetry is turned on. And what I want to do is just start to more or less redefine the actual shape of the book, the geometry. I'm kind of just going over what's already there. I'll go over the cover, the inside cover. Again, just adding some texture. And although this particular model is not going to open, I am going to just hit the inside panel just quickly, again, just to give it some texture, so that if I do decide later on down the road that I do want to make this book animate open, at least I have some geometry there, and I don't have to redo the sculpting process over again. Okay, so I went ahead and gave it a first pass of texture, and I'm probably just going to, that was a vertical pass that I did, I'm probably just going to give it a quick horizontal pass. And that's all really that's necessary. Now, this is important to keep in mind. You don't have to overwork your work. You're trying to achieve a certain look, a certain effect. And if you get that effect quickly, then that's fine. Don't overwork what you're creating. So all that's necessary is that you achieve the look that you're after. So I'm going to divide once again. In fact, I think I'm going to divide up one more time, but I want to check. You can see here I'm getting an undesired effect. That's why I wanted to check first. I'm going to go gently. You'll notice there's a staggering effect that's happening. You see when I'm drawing past here, that's staggering. Well, let me show you how we can actually soften that up. So that's going to be under stroke. And what we're dealing with now is our settings here within the lazy mouse. So I'm going to turn on lazy mouse. And you'll notice we have a radius of 30. What that means is if I pull a stroke, I'm going to get this red line behind my stroke. What that red line is, it's actually a delay. So as I'm drawing, I can actually turn, and it helps you to feel where you're going. But you notice I still have that staggering or that stepping. Well, this is part of the step that we just took a look at in the lazy mouse. So what we want to do now is change our stroke pattern that we have with this stepping, and we want to remove the step. So I'm going to go under my stroke, and by removing my lazy step down to a 0, that's going to actually soften my stroke. Now I still have a delay. There's a delay behind my brush. That may or may not be in your favor. You may be fine with it, but usually I find that as a deterrent. So that's in the radius. So if I just take my radius down to level 1, it cuts my delay shorter. It's almost instant. And so that's one way of changing your brush to being a much more efficient brush. So again, now I want to still mass out my object, but what I have right now, if I do my brush strokes, also my speed is still causing the stepping to occur. So now I pretty much have the book cover in its first stage of roughing out. So I'm going to switch now over to the next part. And I think what I'm going to look for at this point is one of the corner brackets.